She didn't dare to mix in the slightest bit of fake cloth. After Yu Xiang inspected all the cloth, she threw a matching card to the shopkeeper and said indifferently, "Go to the accounts room and withdraw some money. If there's any new jewelry, send someone to bring it over for me to take a look. You won't lose out on the price. Remember, it has to be the most original. I, Yu Xiang, don't rarely wear things that others have worn before." The shopkeeper picked up the matching card and repeatedly agreed. After she happily walked away, Yu Xiu softly said, "Xianger, you also know that I should look at other people. I just happen to need a few sets of clothes and a few sets of hair ornaments. Can you support older sister for a while? In the future, older sister definitely won't forget your good deeds." When she said this, she felt extremely humiliated and resentful. However, for the sake of her future life of luxury, glory, splendor, wealth, and rank, she had no choice but to endure. She didn't know how much this bastard child had fed old ancestor and big brother that they had even handed over their family property. When the real Yu Xiang returned home in the future, she didn't know how bitterly disappointed and wronged she would feel. It was a pity that when she married to Yangzhou, she wouldn't be able to see the "pheasant fell from the phoenix tree" show. When she thought of this, the corners of Yu Xiu's mouth slightly hooked up. Yu Xiang pulled open a piece of cloth and examined it under the sunlight. When she heard this, she faintly glanced at her and said with a smile that wasn't a smile, "What can you do if you buy a few more sets of clothes and hair ornaments? You look beautiful on the outside, but you're an idiot on the inside. Even if I let you marry into a rich and powerful family, you won't be able to play around. Sooner or later, you'll end up alone in your boudoir. I've already told you that you should study more when you're free, but you're good. You accepted the task and didn't do it with all your heart. Instead, you made people dig a hole for me. You also don't know how much weight you have. You're still too inexperienced to play mind games with me. As long as you're willing to put in the effort, you only need to learn a little bit from me and it'll be enough for you to enjoy for the rest of your life. You want to marry so much that you've gone crazy. You didn't investigate the Fang family's situation clearly before you planted your head in it. Who in charge of salt administration is clean? Recently, the emperor has repeatedly checked the national treasury. Salt transportation is the most important thing. Other people are hurriedly picking it out, but you can't wait to jump in. If you drag older brother down, don't blame me for not recognizing my own family. Chapter 31. Yu Xiang took a short nap. When she woke up, she looked at her faded nails and ordered Tao Hong to make some balsamine juice for her. Put more rose essential oil in it. After you dye your nails, it'll leave a faint fragrance. This way, you'll look elegant with a flick of your sleeves. Tao Hong complied and took out a small bowl. He placed balsamine and alum in it and carefully stirred it. Lulu lifted the curtain and entered with a large brocade box. She reported, "Miss, the shopkeeper has delivered the spring clothes and head ornaments. Do you want to choose first, or do you want to send them to eldest miss as they are?" "Send them to her. I'm sure she's craning her neck to look at the door right now." Yu Xiang leaned against the headboard. Her light smock slipped off her shoulders, revealing half of her snow-white arm. A small tube top outlined her exquisite figure. "The spring weather is chilly. It's warm and cold. Miss, you should wear more." Lulu put down the brocade box and added another layer of clothing for her. She then took out her silky black hair and slowly combed it with a fine-toothed comb. After tidying it up neatly, she ordered 2 maidservants to carry her to the dressing table and sit down. Yu Xiang lazily lay on the table, her fingertips fiddling with the red tassel string on the brocade box. She slowly opened her mouth. "When you go, properly instruct the Chiu clan to keep a close eye on Yu Xiu. If Yu Xiu dares to do anything out of line, regardless of whether she offends her superiors or disrespects her seniors, tie her up first. That brain of hers, even if I beat it with a mace, she won't listen to half a word. She'll think that I'm jealous of her and can't bear to see her living well. If she has any evil intentions, she'll definitely walk the path to the end and refuse to give up until she sees the coffin. If it weren't for the fact that I'm afraid she'll burden older brother, I wouldn't care if she's dead or alive. I'll just let her jump into the fire pit." Lulu listened and nodded in agreement. She saw that her mistress' hair was too smooth and couldn't be tied into a bun. She could only wet it with osmanthus oil and use a few silver hairpins to fix it into a butterfly shape. Wuxia looked left and right in front of the bronze mirror and waved his hand in satisfaction. "All right, go quickly." Tao Hong crushed the balsamine and poured the flower juice mixed with alum and rose essential oil into a small bowl. He then soaked it with a ball of cotton. Seeing that Miss was bored to death, he picked a topic and said, "Miss, that young master of the Fong family is really handsome." "Oh. How so?" Wuxia turned to look at her. "His skin is very white, his eyebrows are very handsome, and his nose." Tao Hong said as he used a small pair of tweezers to roll the cotton into a fingernail-sized ball. He carefully placed it on his master's fingertips and then wrapped it with a cloth. While he was talking enthusiastically, Ah Lu, the big parrot hanging under the porch, shouted at the top of its voice, "Master Ho is here! Master Ho is here!" Tao Hong hurriedly shut up, but it was too late. Yu Pinyin walked in expressionlessly and said in a deep voice, "For the next month, no one is allowed to step into the front yard. Those who violate the rules will go to the housekeeper and receive 30 strokes of the cane." Tao Hong trembled with fear as he agreed. Wuxia pursed her lips and smiled. "Brother, is that young master of the Fong family really that handsome?" "He's just a so-so." Yu Pinyin's cold and hard face became even more displeased. He walked behind his sister, pressed her shoulder, and whispered into her ear, "Did his mother say anything today? Isn't it just some small family matters? But looking at her, it seems that she wants you to be her daughter-in-law. You also know that the Fong family is rich and wealthy. You is probably very beautiful right now." Wuxia gently blew the balsam flower juice on her fingernails. A unique fragrance instantly spread in the air, making people intoxicated. Yu Pinyin buried his face in his sister's neck and took a deep breath. Only then did he sit down beside her. He took the small tweezers from Tao Hong's hand and began to dye his sister's fingernails. His movements were very practiced. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have imagined that the general of agile cavalry, who was invincible on the battlefield, could have such a tender side to him. The Fong family looks beautiful now, but in fact, it's already in the midst of a raging fire. It doesn't have much time left. As for you have to give her a good beating. Don't let her drag me down with her, Marquis Yongla. You too, don't just listen to people talking about how handsome you are and think." Seeing that her brother was about to start talking endlessly again, Wuxia hurriedly put her free hand around his neck. The corners of her lips curled up, and she said fawningly, "I know. No matter how handsome he is, how can he compare to my brother? The stranger is like jade, and the young master is unparalleled. In this world, you won't be able to find a husband as handsome as my brother. Moreover, my brother is invincible and invincible. You're my Han Dynasty's unparalleled hero. If I want to marry, I must marry someone like my brother. Those ordinary people simply can't enter my eyes." She blinked her sparkling cat eyes and chuckled, "However, I'm afraid that there isn't a man more outstanding than my brother in this world. Therefore, I'm destined to never be able to marry in this lifetime. Brother, you have to support me." She moved closer and used the tip of her nose to touch Yu Pinyin's nose. The warm lotus fragrance was intoxicating. Yu Pinyin's gaze became absent-minded for a moment. When he entered the capital, his head, which was raised to the sky, could not be lowered. He always thought that his son was a talent in managing the world, 1 in 10,000, and that the girls of other families had to be picked and chosen by him. Fong Jichen thought about the predicament his father was in. Sure enough, only the commander-in-chief, who was above the 3 departments, could save him. He could only swallow the humiliation and nod. Son will listen to mother. Just one thing. Before the engagement, find a chance to meet this family, you eldest Mississippi. The Pei clan happily patted her son's head and smiled. Of course. Although this family, you eldest miss, is a concubine's daughter, she grew up by her legitimate mother's side. Her appearance and bearing are not bad. You will definitely be satisfied. The mother and son discussed for a while and decided on the marriage. After the court examination, he would be the top scorer and would go to the Marquis household to propose marriage. The author has something to say: thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. I'm still early. Every time his younger sister went out, she would spend at least an hour dressing up. Yu Pinyin had long been accustomed to this. He sat by her side and drank tea, his dark eyes never leaving her fair and delicate face. Yu Xiang dipped some charcoal powder and carefully smeared it along the direction of her eyebrows. After deliberately thickening and darkening it, she gently drew it up at the end of her eyebrows. Her face, which was already beautiful and dazzling, immediately looked extremely fierce. She looked left and right in front of the bronze mirror and changed a few places. Then, she raised her eyebrows and smiled proudly at her brother. See? This is called the unibrow blade style. Does it feel very fierce? This is exactly the effect I want. She then dyed the ends of her eyes with a weasel brush and hooked it. Her round and big cat eyes became even brighter. Then, she squinted slightly and looked at her brother. Look at me. Do you feel that your heart is trembling and panicking? You don't even dare to come forward and talk to me. Those talkative girls always laugh at me behind my back. I want to crush them in terms of appearance. I want to make them feel ashamed and take a detour. Hearing this, Yu Pinyin's chaotic heartbeat gradually calmed down. He felt both funny and sympathetic. He tapped the tip of her nose and said, "That's right. Just your face alone can make them die of beauty. Not only do they die of beauty, but I'm also almost dead of beauty when I look at myself in the mirror." Yu Xiang turned her face in front of the mirror. Yu Pinyin put down his teacup. He laughed and pinched her cheeks. He joked, "Let me see how thick my little Xiang's skin is. I'm afraid that even a crossbow arrow might not be able to pierce through it." Yu Xiang shook her head left and right to avoid him. The brother and sister pair instantly became a mess. After a quarter of an hour, Yu Xiang laughed and fell into her brother's arms. She said angrily, "Stop fooling around. We won't be able to make it in time for the ritual. I haven't put on lipstick yet." Yu Pinyin let go of her soft cheeks and smeared some lipstick on her face. After that, he pinched her chin and admired it for a long time. Then, he put her down and carried her into the wheelchair. Yu Xiang saw that he didn't push her out of the door. Instead, he turned around and went to the cubicle. She called out warily, "What are you doing?" The old ancestor must be waiting anxiously. Yu Pinyin smiled but didn't say anything. He held a wet handkerchief in his hand and wiped off the makeup that she had painstakingly applied for more than an hour. He smiled and said, "It's fine if you're so beautiful that you die of it. Don't harm others." There were too many people at the ritual. He didn't want his precious little sister to be seen by other men. "At least put a flower ornament on my forehead." Yu Xiang made a last-ditch effort. Yu Pinyin rummaged through her makeup box and found the simplest flower ornament that looked like a cinnabar mole. He stuck it between her eyebrows and urged, "It's done. Let's go. How about the lotus-shaped one? It's not that eye-catching." Yu Xiang tugged on his sleeve. Yu Pinyin didn't answer. He bent down and peeled off the cinnabar mole between her eyebrows. She hurriedly hid her face in his arms and shouted, "It's done, it's done. It's done. Brother, let's go quickly." Yu Pinyin hugged her shoulders and chuckled. Although the old lady believed in Buddhism, an annual event like the tea gathering was a good opportunity to visit her old friends. Naturally, she couldn't miss it. At this time, she had already dressed up and was sitting in the hall drinking tea. When she saw her granddaughter, who was wearing no makeup and looking listless, she smiled and said, "Oh, did your brother wash off your makeup again? Isn't that so? It's always like this at a larger gathering. How can I face others?" Yu Xiang sighed. The matriarch laughed even harder. She pinched the tip of her nose and said, "If you don't have the face to see others, how will all the noble maidens in the capital deal with themselves? You have to leave a way out for others." She wasn't boasting, but her granddaughter's appearance was one of the best in the entire Great Han dynasty. If she hadn't tragically lost her legs, the iceman who came to propose marriage would have trampled down the Marquis household steps. Yu Pinyin warmly agreed, "Old ancestor is right. That's why I always tell her not to harm others. It's enough for her to harm only me." These words sounded a little strange, but the matriarch didn't think much of it. Mama Ma came in with a red envelope and reported, "The old lady, this is the marriage proposal from the Fong clan. Do you want to take a look?" The matriarch waved her hand carelessly, "What's there to look at? Anyway, it's going to be rejected. Have you made arrangements with the monastery head?" After Fong Jichen came in third place in the high school, the Pei clan arranged a meeting with Wuxia. Both sides were very satisfied, and not long after, the iceman came to propose marriage. Because the matriarch and the Pei clan's mother were old friends for decades, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that they were as close as sisters. Even if she wanted to refuse, she couldn't make it too obvious. Therefore, she asked her to send the marriage proposal first. When the time came, she would just say that the two of them didn't match. "We've already discussed it. These two characters definitely won't match. It's a pity that such a good marriage would be ruined." Mama Ma sighed as she put the marriage proposal into her sleeve. The two of them weren't playing a game of riddles. After a little thought, one would know what they were talking about. Yu Siyu, who arrived late because of her meticulous makeup, happened to hear the whole story. Love Qin Yu through a landmine report time Feng Gua through a landmine report time and EC through a grenade report time S through a landmine report time Hua Yazi through a grenade report time Air Bao YY 0 through a grenade report time Buffong 1 through a landmine report time Throw a landmine report time Ye through a landmine report time Lien Kai Bingti through a landmine report time Shi through a landmine report time Buggy. In the book through a landmine report time E. Leslie through a landmine report time Shi through a landmine report time Love Qing Yu through a grenade report time Luo Shiba through a landmine report time New Old Dream through a landmine report time Luo Shiba through a landmine report time I'm a Rice Bug. Chapter 33. The Crown Princess had been having a hard time recently. If she had married into an ordinary family, it would have been a great thing to have twins. But she had married into the royal family, so the situation was the complete opposite. Giving birth to two sons was considered bad luck. Giving birth to two daughters was considered bad luck. Giving birth to one son and one daughter was a great auspicious sign, but there were hidden dangers. The birth of a dragon and the death of a phoenix were considered bad luck. The birth of a dragon and the death of a phoenix were considered bad luck. Only when the twins were safe could it be considered stable. After thinking about it, it was better to have only one child. It was a 50-50 chance, so there was no need to worry so much. What made her even more anxious was that the crown prince only had one son in the 6 years she had married into the Eastern Palace. Compared to the other princes who had many children, it was really pitiful. The emperor valued the concubine very much. The crown prince's lack of a legitimate son had always been his sore point, so he was more and more dissatisfied with the crown princess these years. In addition, vice-concubine Su's ambition grew. During her pregnancy, she frequently spread rumors to disturb her mind. Several sisters-in-law also secretly tried to trip her up and make her abort the baby. It was difficult to describe the dangers. Although the crown princess acted calmly, she could not stand it anymore. That was why she went to the Taoist temple to pray. After delivering the offerings, she stood in front of the lot pot for half an hour, not daring to reach out for it. She could only call Wuxia in. It was fine if she drew the good lot, but if she drew the bad lot, she could comfort herself that it was someone else who drew it and had nothing to do with her. After taking the lot, her fingertips trembled slightly. She handed it to the Taoist temple without looking at it. The Taoist temple made a sound of surprise. She straightened her back and asked, "Is the lot bad?" The old lady held the Buddha beads and silently chanted, Amitabha. Suddenly, she remembered that this was a Taoist temple. She quickly apologized and changed it to, Immeasurable God. Yu's eyes flashed. She was just waiting to see Wuxia's bad luck. She was still willing to get involved in this kind of situation where she could not get anything good out of it. It was obvious that her intelligence and ability were all flattered by her ancestor and brother. The Taoist temple looked at it carefully for a moment, then smiled and waved his hand. No, I have to congratulate the crown princess. You have drawn the only lot of the dragon and phoenix lot. Crown princess, please take a look. Then he presented the lot with both hands. The crown princess took a closer look and saw that the signature was marked with a dragon and a phoenix connected from top to bottom. Fan Jiaojiao immediately walked over, pulled out the whip at her waist and flicked it on the table. She snorted, "Did you hear that? The 9th princess wants to sit. Hurry up and move." Under Wuxia's unremitting teaching, she was developing in the direction of a fierce daughter from a general's family. No matter how one looked at her, she was valiant. The 4 noble ladies stood up with humiliated expressions and moved to the stairs. The rest of the people stood up and bowed. The 9th princess looked straight ahead and walked over. She picked up the pastries that the 4 of them had never eaten before and began to bite into them. The crumbs at the corner of her mouth immediately dispelled her noble aura and turned it into a foolish aura. Wuxia glanced at her and faintly sighed at the beautiful spring scenery outside the window. "What's wrong? Eat." The 9th princess picked up a piece of cloud cake and eagerly handed it over. "Eat by yourself. Slow down, don't choke. Didn't you eat when you left the palace?" "I did. My appetite has been increasing recently. Imperial sister-in-law and imperial mother don't allow me to eat too much. They say I'll become as fat as when I was young and won't be able to get married next year." The 9th princess's cheeks kept moving like a hamster. "They're just scaring you. When you were young, you weren't fat, you were round. You looked good." Fan Jiaojiao's flattery skills had improved over the years. She didn't do it on purpose. It was just that she had a straightforward personality and liked the 9th princess very much, so her words were naturally a bit mushy. Wuxia nodded in agreement. As they chatted, there was a sudden commotion in the tea room. One of the noble ladies screamed, "Ah, it's the Zhuangyuan. He's also here." Everyone looked in the direction she was pointing. They saw that in a small pavilion 3 or 4 meters downstairs, several young scholars were sitting around drinking wine and chatting. When they reached a good part of the story, they couldn't help but pick up their chopsticks and tap the sides of their bowls, singing loudly. The smoky green willow branches hung down in all directions. They rose and fell in the breeze, as if they were dancing to the song. It was quite elegant. However, even more elegant and enchanting was the Zhuangyuan's unusually handsome facial features. He was smiling lightly, frowning, or expressionless. All kinds of expressions made people feel intoxicated. The 9th princess forgot to swallow the pastry in her mouth. She murmured, so handsome as the lotus seed cake." As she said this, she stood up and leaned out to look. With her taking the lead, the other noble ladies also forgot to be reserved. They all squeezed to the window to look, occasionally exclaiming in surprise. Wuxia glanced over and was slightly surprised. The legendary Zhuan Yuan was actually that downtrodden young master who had attempted to commit suicide by crashing into a carriage. In just 2 short months, he really had made a meteoric rise. After a few glances, her attention was attracted by the tall figure with his back to the tea room. If the scholars were compared to green bamboos, that figure was like a pine tree. Moreover, it was the cloud-soaring pine tree that had taken root at the top of a cliff. It had a persevering and heroic bearing. He didn't need to show his face. In Yuxiang's eyes, he was the most special existence. The laughter of the noble ladies attracted the attention of the youths by the lake. Although they didn't show it on their faces, they were slightly proud. The volume of their recitations unconsciously increased. Only that person turned a deaf ear to it and turned a blind eye to it. He only placed his hand on the hilt of the sword at his waist. His back was straight, and one could vaguely see the strong and tense muscles hidden under the official's robe. Yuxiang stared at him for a long time. Seeing that he didn't notice her, her eyes turned. She took out a few red beans from her pouch and threw them at him. Then, she immediately bent down and hid under the windowsill. There was the sound of something breaking through the air. Yu Pinyin quickly dodged. He looked down and saw that it was a few red beans. He turned to look at the tea room and found that the 9th princess was holding half a pastry in her mouth and staring foolishly at Shen Yuanqi. Fan Jiaojiao waved her hand at him and winked at him. He didn't know what she was trying to say. Yu Pinyin raised his eyebrows and pretended not to care. He turned around and continued to stare at the disguised crown prince in the pavilion. Yuxiang covered her mouth and snickered. Then, she took out a few more red beans and threw them at him. However, she found that her brother quickly turned around and glanced at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. He silently reprimanded her, "Naughty again." Yuxiang leaned against the windowsill and sent him a proud look. She already looked like a painting, and her head was shrouded in the splendid light of spring. The cinnabar between her eyebrows shone brightly, tender and alluring, causing everyone by the lake to raise their heads to look at her, their eyes filled with infatuation. Especially Shen Yuanqi and Fang Jichen. Their eyes almost couldn't move. The joy on Yu Pinyin's face instantly disappeared. He picked up a red bean from the ground and threw it at the window where she was. There was a crisp sound. The bamboo pole supporting the window frame broke and the window fell down heavily. Fortunately, Yuxiang understood her brother's temperament. When he bent down to pick up the red bean, she hurriedly dodged. She also pulled the 9th princess away from the window. Otherwise, their noses would have been knocked out. "Your brother is angry again. Every time I see him, he's angry." The 9th princess shook her head and sighed. "Yandere is really amazing. My father said that he was the #1 expert of the great Han dynasty." These words were true. "You're an expert after all, so you're bound to have a little temper." Fan Jiaojiao began to flatter again. Yuxiang ignored the two and immediately went to open the window. However, he found that there was no one by the lakeside. There was only a group of dragon-scale guards holding swords and halberds hurriedly walking past. Shen Yuanqi took his leave from the crown prince and walked in front of Yu Pinyin. He cupped his hands and said, "This official greets Master Ho. Is that young lady just now Master Ho's younger sister?" Fang Jichen was also planning to leave. When he heard this, he couldn't help but look at the two people. The young lady's face, brighter and more beautiful than spring, kept appearing in his mind. For a moment, he was a little dazed. He had never imagined that the lame miss of the first wife was actually such a stunning beauty. Her face alone was enough to make up for all the flaws in her body. "Lord Shen, you've overstepped your bounds." Yu Pinyin's tone was cold. His right hand rested on the embroidered spring saber at his waist and gently stroked the hilt. Shen Yuanqi realized that he had been impulsive. He hurriedly bowed and apologized. Yu Pinyin nodded expressionlessly and strode away. Shen Yuanqi touched his slightly cold neck. He felt both gratified and disappointed. His only family member was close at hand, but he couldn't recognize her. She was now the daughter of the first wife of the Marquis household. She was deeply doted on by her elder brother and grandmother. She enjoyed endless glory, splendor, wealth, and luxury. If he rashly came to recognize her, he didn't know whether or not she would resent him. Forget it, let's wait and see. Shen Miaoqi had recently entered the capital. He estimated that it wouldn't be long before she found the Marquis Yongla. It was extremely difficult for the Marquis household to find a merchant with the surname Shen. On the other hand, it was very easy for the family Shen to find the Marquis household. There were only a few Marquis households in the capital. In addition, there was the clue of the disaster 10 years ago. He just needed to ask around a little to find out. Based on Shen Miaoqi's temperament, she would definitely take back everything that belonged to her. He would wait for her to make the first move before making other arrangements. The author has something to say. Thank you to my cute little creatures. Also thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Otherwise, family, you will be unhappy. The members of the Pei clan were unhappy. They sneered, what right does family you have to be unhappy? It is the good fortune of his family that we are willing to take the cripple. You are His Majesty's hand-picked Tanhua. Not only are you brimming with talent and handsome appearance, but you also have a boundless future. Which family's daughter can't you marry? If I am willing to let my good son marry their cripple, their family should be secretly happy. The members of the Pei clan patted their son's shoulder and continued, son, don't look at her family's high status. With Yu Xiang's qualifications, I'm afraid that no one will want her in this lifetime. Marrying her is only a temporary measure. In the future, when your father gets out of his predicament and you have a meteoric rise, we can't let a cripple take over the position of the family's matriarch. Because of your situation, I can also submit a letter to the clan elders to fight for the position of a second wife for Qian. Once we get her, she will be at our mercy. Feng Zhichen felt that his confidence was lacking. He waved his hand and said, no, no. If Marquis Yongla finds out, he will come knocking on our door. If he wants to ruin Yu Xiang's reputation and make no one dare to marry her in this lifetime, he can just come knocking on our door. Do you think our family will be afraid of him? Don't worry, I've already asked around. He dotes on Yu Xiang very much and protects her like she's his treasure. Once Yu Xiang is in our hands, it means that we have grasped his weakness. Even if he wants to get rid of the rats, he will have to consider the jade bottle, right? When the time comes, whether you want to be stationed in the capital or be promoted or transferred, you can go to him. For the sake of Yu Xiang, there is no reason for him to refuse. The Pei clan's wishful thinking crackled loudly. Feng Zhichen thought about it carefully and felt that it was right. A married daughter was like spilled water. If they wanted their daughter to have a good life, shouldn't they treat their son-in-law well? Although Yu Xiang's family was prominent and it wouldn't be difficult for her to divorce, her situation was very different from others. She was a cripple. If she really left the Feng clan, her life would be over and she would only end up alone. With how much Yu Pinyin doted on her, he wouldn't be willing to part with her no matter what. The more the mother and son thought about it, the more they felt that this matter was feasible. They immediately went to find the old madam to exchange marriage notes. Suddenly, they felt that if they were too impatient, it wouldn't look good on them. They could only endure for the time being. On the other hand, Yu Xiu also heard that her great marriage had fallen through. She hated the old madam to the bone. She hid in her room and pondered for half a day before finally coming up with a solution. Yu Xiang didn't know that the mother and son of the Pei clan were already thinking about her. After drinking tea and sending off the 9th princess and Fan Jiaojiao, she let the maidservant push her back leisurely. Seeing that the small courtyard where she lived was almost within reach, a gentle and sweet voice sounded from behind her. Xiang'er, can I have a word with you? Yu Xiang turned around to look. She frowned and thought for a moment before hesitantly saying, Chang Yafu. It had been 3 years since they last saw each other, and Chang Yafu had grown even more beautiful. However, in front of Yu Xiang, Chang Yafu was no longer beautiful. Her incomparably beautiful face immediately looked a little tacky. Chang Yafu forced a smile and spoke again. Xiang'er, can I have a word with you? Yu Xiang could roughly guess what she was going to say. She used her fingertips to touch the corner of her lips and said, then let's go. The master and servants followed Chang Yafu to the small courtyard where she lived. However, she was determined not to enter the house for a long chat. She only stopped under the large locust tree in the courtyard and quietly gazed at the misty mountain range in the distance. Her posture was extremely leisurely. Chang Yafu saw that she had no intention of initiating a conversation, so he could only disperse the servants in the courtyard. He also hinted at Yu Xiang's 2 maidservants to stand further away. Tao Hong's Lu Lu stood firm. Chang Yafu looked pleadingly at Yu Xiang. Yu Xiang lazily waved her hand. Only then did the 2 of them leave. They walked to the entrance of the courtyard and stood on the left and right like 2 door gods. Their eyes were unblinking as they stared at their master. If you have something to say, just say it. I don't have the time to listen to you beat around the bush. Yu Xiang raised her chin. Chang Yafu originally wanted to exchange a few pleasantries before getting to the main topic, but when he heard this, he hurriedly said, Xiang'er, I'm going to be removed from the server in a month. You know this too, right? I know. Yu Xiang lowered her head to admire her bright red nails. Can you help me send this letter to your older brother? Back then, it was my father's idea. I'm just a weak woman. How could I make the decision? I could only be manipulated by others. My feelings for your older brother are definitely not fake. After so many misunderstandings, he has to give me a chance to explain. You see, I'm already 19 this year. If he wants to break off the engagement, how would I have the face to see anyone in this lifetime? You're also a girl, so you should be able to understand my difficulties. Back then, older sister let you down. Older sister has long known that she was wrong. Please help older sister this time. When she spoke of her sorrow, Chang Yafu's tears flowed out. With both hands, he presented an exquisite envelope that emitted a fragrance. I'm sorry. Chapter 35. Other than butterflies, Yu Xiang was afraid of all kinds of insects, especially those soft insects. Now that she was covered in them, some of them even burrowed into her undergarments through her collar. That feeling was not only frightening, but the hairs on the insects, which were finer than her pores, burrowed into her blood vessels upon contact with her skin, causing a large area of unbearable itchy blisters. Yu Xiang was scared silly. She sat stiffly in her wheelchair, not daring to move. She was afraid that the insects in her hair would also enter her collar when she swayed. Tao Hong, Lu Lu, quickly, help me get rid of these insects. Her voice carried a strong sobbing tone. Lulu took out a handkerchief to help the young miss pat the insects. Tao Hong pushed a 12 to 13-year-old youth who had slipped down from the tree to the ground. The youth was Duke Jinggua's only legitimate son, Chang Qi. He had been spoiled since he was a child and was given the nickname of Devil Incarnate. Today, he was holding a pair of bamboo chopsticks in the courtyard to catch insects. He collected a bottle and fed it to his thrush bird. Just as he was about to go down the tree, he saw his older sister bring a cripple in. He was curious and hid in the tree to eavesdrop. When he heard the end, his lungs were about to explode. Marquis Yongla's crippled younger sister also had a bad reputation in the capital. She was crafty, unkind, and had a perverse temperament. When she spoke, her words were as sharp as a knife. Only today did he know that she was even more hateful than the rumor said. Chang-Chi opened the bottle and without thinking, poured the entire bottle of insects down. At this time, Tao Hong had pushed her to the ground and scraped her palm, so her hatred became even deeper. She climbed up and kicked Tao Hong over. She still had some sense and did not make a move on Yuxiang. She only picked up the dead branches and leaves on the ground and threw them at her head, cursing that she was unclean. Chang Yafu originally wanted to stop her, but when he saw Yuxiang's pitiful appearance and saw that she was about to cry, he felt great pleasure in his heart. He retreated a few steps and coldly watched from the side. Lulu swatted away the bugs on the outside of her clothes, but she couldn't deal with the bugs inside. She wanted to ask Tao Hong to come over and help push the mist back, but she was repeatedly stopped by Chang-Chi, who even kicked her several times. Lulu saw that the situation was not good, so he left his master and Tao Hong and ran out. The bugs crawled in and out of her clothes, and a large number of small blisters appeared on her back. It was very uncomfortable. Yuxiang suppressed the trembling of her body, gritted her teeth, and said, "Chang Yafu, you're still as brainless as before. Based on what you and your brother have done today, don't even think about stepping into my Marquis Yongle in this lifetime." Chang Yafu finally came to his senses. Just as he was about to step forward to stop his younger brother from throwing stones at Yuxiang's head, he saw Yu Pinyin striding over, followed by a sweaty Lulu. Yu Pinyin was known as the Jade-Faced King of Hell. At this moment, his eyes were filled with murderous intent, causing people to retreat. He grabbed Chang-Chi by the neck and threw him far away, then looked at his younger sister. He saw that her eyes were closed, and she was biting her lips. Her face was as pale as paper, and there were a few drops of tears on her thick eyelashes. They swayed along with her trembling body. Her head and body were covered with dead branches and leaves, and there were red marks on her forehead from being hit by stones. She looked pitiful and embarrassed. Yu Pinyin's heart fiercely clenched, and the murderous intent in his eyes intensified. He bent down to carry her, but she pushed him away and said in a trembling voice, "Don't press your hands on my back. It's itchy, painful, and there are a lot of bugs in my underwear." Yu Pinyin gently comforted her, "Big brother knows. I'll take you back now. Don't be afraid, Big brother is here." He hugged his younger sister's slender waist with one hand and supported her buttocks with the other. He carried her into his arms like he was carrying a child, and left with large strides. He didn't even look at Chang Yafu the entire time. Lulu bowed to Chang Yafu and said with a fake smile, "Miss Chang, thank you for taking care of master today. When this servant returns, this servant will definitely report the truth to the old lady and have her personally thank you." After saying this, she pulled Tao Hong and left. Chang Yafu sprinted to the entrance of the courtyard, but the group of people had already left. He didn't know when, but a fine and dense spring rain had drifted down from the sky. When it fell on his skin, it was chilly and chilled his heart. Chang-Chi clutched his aching buttocks and angrily said, "What kind of plaything is that prefecture you? How dare they treat this air like this? Sister, don't be sad. I'll definitely have father help us get justice." Chang Yafu looked at him in disbelief for a long time, then suddenly smiled sadly, "What kind of plaything is that prefecture you? Let me tell you, even the princes have to show some respect to that plaything. If you don't want father to punish you according to the family rules, then come with me to apologize." Chang-Chi refused and reluctantly nodded under Chang Yafu's threats and promises. He left with a belly full of resentment. As soon as Yu Pinyin put his younger sister down, he saw her quickly pull off the pearl hairpin in her hair, untie her hair bun, and constantly scratch the roots of her hair. Following that, she took off her smock, outer robe, and inner clothes. In the blink of an eye, only a small pink doodoo was left to wrap around her exquisite body. Although she was only 14 years old, the young girl's body had already developed to perfection. It could be said that if she gained a little weight, she would gain a little weight, and if she lost a little weight, she would lose a little weight. In particular, the 2 round lumps on her chest trembled under her frantic patting, as if they were about to jump out. The already pitiful amount of cloth simply couldn't hide this extremely seductive style. However, she didn't seem to be aware of this. She lifted the dudu and looked inside, then reached behind her to untie the knot. Only then did Upinion recover from his burning state. He grabbed her hands and placed his large palm on the back of her delicate and smooth neck, pressing this insanely beautiful body into his embrace. The round lumps on her chest were covered, but the soft touch was directly pressed against his chest. There was also a faint but alluring fragrance that lingered around his nose. Upinion's Adam's apple moved up and down. He completely didn't know what to do with the person in his embrace. It was like hugging a ball of fire in the middle of winter. He knew that he would be burned to death, but he couldn't bear to let go. It was simply too terrible. However, very quickly, his attention was attracted by the large patch of blisters on his younger sister's back. The snow-white skin was covered with red and swollen scars. The scene was truly shocking. His eyes instantly surged with murderous intent. Lulu stood helplessly at the door with the ointment in her hand. She stammered, "Master Ho, let this servant help Miss apply the ointment. Could you please leave for a moment? Although they were brother and sister, you shouldn't be so unrestrained, right?" Tao Hong didn't notice at all. He was busy cleaning up the bugs that had fallen on the bed. Upinion gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to let go of his younger sister, she hugged his waist and cried out, "Older brother, you have to help me whip Chang-Chi to death." And Chang Yafu, she actually allowed her younger brother to bully me. If you marry her in the future, I don't know how you'll torture me. With such a vicious sister-in-law, I don't need to stay at home anymore. Just send me to the country estate. Upinion's heart felt as if it was being stabbed by a knife. He gently stroked her hair with his fingers. His tone was extremely gentle, but his expression was abnormally cold. "Xianger, don't worry. Older brother will definitely teach him a lesson he won't forget. As for Chang Yafu, he can forget about stepping into my Marquis Yongla for the rest of his life." Only then was Yu Xiang satisfied. She sobbed and let go of his hand. Upinion turned his head away and walked out of the courtyard with stiff steps. He stood in the corridor for a long time. The fire in his heart couldn't be extinguished no matter what. He could only step into the light drizzle and let the cold raindrops help him sober up. The 2 dragon scale guards standing guard outside the courtyard were worried. They kept looking at him, wondering if they should give him an oil paper umbrella. Although the rain wasn't heavy, it was very dense. In a short 15 minutes, the lieutenant's hair was completely soaked. The pitter-patter of water slid down his hair and into his lapels. Just as they were hesitating, they heard the lieutenant coldly order, "Find a basket of small bugs. They're not poisonous." The 2 guards obeyed and left. Anyone who had stayed in the Dragon Scale Guard's torture chamber knew that the small bugs that Commander Yu spoke of were completely different from the small bugs that normal people spoke of. After standing in the rain for a while, the burning sensation in his chest slowly faded away. Upinion was just about to walk away when he saw Chang Yafu and Chang-Chi walking over, trembling with fear. "Pinion, I brought Chi-er here to apologize to you. I hope that you'll be magnanimous and not bicker with him. He's still young. It's inevitable that he'll lose his sense of propriety when he causes trouble. I've already taught him a lesson. Big brother Yu, I was wrong." Chang-Chi lowered her head. She didn't dare to meet Upinion's eyes. Suddenly, she felt indignant and raised her head to shout, but Yu Xiang was also wrong. "She humiliated my older sister and said that she wasn't worthy of marrying you. Who does she think she is? How can she make decisions about your marriage with my older sister?" Upinion nodded expressionlessly. "It's true that our prefecture you can't make decisions about my marriage with your older sister, but it's up to your Duke Jinghui estate to make the decision. If you say that she can marry you, then she'll marry you. If you say that she can't marry you, then she can break off the engagement at any time. Our prefecture Yu has known this for a long time. It's Xiang, who doesn't know proper etiquette. Chang Qi was rendered speechless by his sarcasm. She really couldn't bring up what happened back then. It was indeed the Duke Jinghua estate's betrayal. Chang Yafu's face was deathly pale. He was on the verge of collapsing. Right at that moment, 2 dragon-scale guards came in carrying a bamboo basket. They looked at the domain chief with questioning eyes. Yu Pinyin pointed at Chang Qi, then hurriedly left. Chang Qi was at a loss. Just as she was about to look into the bamboo basket, she saw the 2 dragon-scale guards walk in front of her and pour the contents of the basket onto her body. It was a bunch of snakes as thick as a pinky finger. They had just woken up from their hibernation and were rather lazy. Some of them coiled around the top of her head, unwilling to move, while others burrowed into her clothes in search of a warm place to stay. Chang Qi was immediately scared out of her wits. She screamed at the top of her lungs. Her voice was loud enough to disperse the thick, dark clouds in the sky. Chang Yafu was also scared out of her wits. She continuously retreated, raised her oil paper umbrella, and jumped and screamed to chase the snakes away. When Yuxiang heard the commotion, she ordered Tao Hong, Lu, to carry her to the window to check. She immediately convulsed with laughter. Fortunately, Yu Pinyin didn't kill her. The snakes she found were all non-venomous, so they were only used to scare her. The siblings screamed for half an hour. Seeing that they were about to faint from exhaustion, the 2 dragon-scale guards finally sent someone to pass a message to Duke Jinghua, telling him to come and carry her. It wasn't easy for them to have such a legitimate son. Duke Jinghua and his wife hated that they couldn't keep him in their arms and in their mouths at all times. Seeing their son come back battered and exhausted, with a large pool of urine on his crotch and his hands and feet trembling non-stop, it was obvious that he was scared out of his wits. The husband and wife felt as if their hearts were being cut by a knife. They grabbed their daughter and scolded her. Then, they aggressively went to find old Madame Yu to reason with her. This Yu Pinyin really spoiled Yuxiang too much. He was so unforgiving even when children were playing around. He was simply unreasonable. The author has something to say: thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. A good-for-nothing who specializes in picking up used shoes. Duke Jinghua and his wife suddenly opened their eyes wide, as if they had seen a ghost. The old lady accidentally broke the prayer beads and asked anxiously, "There's such a thing? Exchanging tokens of love?" Good, as expected of my good granddaughter-in-law. So shameless, so lewd. You still have the face to come here and denounce us? Someone, beat them out of here. Hurry up and fight. The old lady stood up and bellowed angrily. She knew that the Chang family wanted to form a marriage alliance with the third branch, but she didn't know that Chang Yafu already had an affair with the third branch's legitimate son. The Chang family actually wanted to shove a piece of trash into his prefecture Yu's hands. What wishful thinking. The servants loudly agreed and went out to look for sticks. If they stayed any longer, they would be beaten and their reputations would be ruined. Duke Jinghua and his wife buried their heads and covered their faces as they ran away. The old lady had a belly full of anger, but she had nowhere to vent it. She slammed the table and asked sternly, "You already knew about this matter. Why didn't you tell me? If I had known that Chang Yafu was so unrestrained, would have broken off the engagement when the old Duke Jinghua hadn't died yet. How could I have tolerated him for so many years? This won't do. Wait until next month, when he's out of service, I'll go and break off the engagement. He's simply going too far." When she thought about how she had almost been persuaded by Duke Jinghua's wife to agree to this marriage, she suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Yu Pinyin gently patted her back and gently said, I'm telling you now, yet you're still so angry. If I told you back then, wouldn't you have been so angry that you'd be bedridden for a few more months? How could grandson bear to do that? The old lady's heart ached like it was being twisted, but she also gnashed her teeth in hatred. She pulled on her grandson's hand and wiped away her tears. How much had this child suffered while she was unaware of it? She didn't dare to think too deeply about it. How could his grandfather arrange such a terrible marriage for him? When he went to the Yellow Springs, he would definitely find that old thing to settle this debt. Yu Pinyin smiled slightly as he wiped the old lady's tears. When Xiang found out about this, she was even more agitated than the old ancestor. She even took out the dagger he gave her and said that she was going to stab Chang Yafu. It was enough to have two people by his side who treated him wholeheartedly. He had also tempered himself for many years before he truly understood that what should be given up should be decisively given up, and what should be cherished must be firmly grasped. The old lady and her grandson stayed in silence for a while before she felt much better. She saw that his hair was half wet and he had changed his clothes. Just as she was about to ask him why he was taking a bath in this cold weather, a dragon scale guard hastily rushed in and reported, "Commander, the Crown Prince requests your presence." The old lady immediately felt that something was amiss and hurriedly urged her grandson to leave. Meanwhile, the Crown Princess was in a good mood after receiving the Dragon Phoenix lot that Yu Xiang had drawn. She was resting in a side room in the rear hall when she saw the spring rain outside. Several plum blossoms spat out bright red flower buds that looked especially adorable with water droplets. She ignored the palace maid's attempts to stop her and held up an oil paper umbrella to look for the plum blossoms. Strolling to the edge of the plum blossom forest, she saw a drooping flower gate that was wide open. Opposite was a courtyard where ordinary people lived. Although it didn't occupy a large area, there were at least 7 or 8 families squeezed together. It was now the end of spring and the weather was cold. It didn't feel cold when the sun was out, but when it rained, it was piercingly cold. In addition, the mountaintop was much colder than the flat ground. It was simply impossible to live without burning charcoal. The Taoist children were afraid that the pilgrims would fall ill from the cold, so they piled up a lot of charcoal in a corner of the courtyard. They also burned a large pot of fire at the side. Anyone who wanted to start a stove would have to come and collect the sparks themselves. A beautiful servant girl was currently adding sparks to the fire she had brought along while adding charcoal to the pot. This was to prevent the fire from being extinguished when others came. The charcoal crackled as it entered the pot and emitted a large cloud of thick smoke, causing the servant girl to cough repeatedly. The Crown Princess covered her nose and mouth. Just as she was about to turn around, she heard a female physician beside her shout, "Not good, there's something wrong with the smoke." Everyone panicked and didn't know how to react. They saw the Crown Princess suddenly stagger, clutching her abdomen as she softly cried, "Quickly help me back, my stomach hurts. She's having a miscarriage." Senior servant Song hurriedly ordered people to lift the Crown Princess and quickly rushed back. As if remembering something, she shouted at the nearby dragon scale guard, "Quickly go and find His Highness the Crown Prince and Commandant Yu. Also, capture that girl." The dragon scale guard obeyed the order and left. The head of the Baiyun monastery was proficient in medicine. After making a diagnosis, he discovered that the Crown Princess was about to give birth prematurely. He hurriedly ordered people to prepare the delivery room and immediately knelt in the Lei Zhu Hall to pray. The accompanying female physicians and midwives were on high alert, their hearts burning with anxiety. Ordinary dragon scale guard didn't even dare to touch a first-rank official. In this world, other than the Emperor, only Commandant Yu could tear them to pieces. Not to mention that this maidservant was full of nonsense. Even if she really came from a wealthy family, what could she do to them? The maidservant shook her head repeatedly and screamed, "I don't know which marquis household it is. I only know that 14 years ago, I was mistaken for someone else and my father died under a bandit's knife. You can ask around, I guarantee that you'll know. I'm the legitimate daughter of the Marquis household, I'm the legitimate daughter of the Marquis household. Suddenly, she felt that her threat just now was really inappropriate, so she hurriedly tried to remedy it. As long as the two of you are willing to help me find my family will definitely repay the two of you handsomely. Today's harsh treatment will also be written off. I still have the swaddling clothes that my family left for me in my room. The cloth is a tribute from the palace, I can show it to you. The more she spoke, the more bizarre it became. The two dragon scale guards shook their heads and sneered, their hands gradually becoming heavier. As soon as Upinion stepped over the threshold, he heard the maidservant's threats and bribes. His stern expression didn't change, but his heart was slightly moved. He quickly walked over and waved his two subordinates away. He pinched the maidservant's chin and lifted her face to carefully examine it. The maidservant was already in tears. Feeling the cold temperature on her chin, she couldn't help but tremble. She forced herself to open her eyes and immediately gritted her teeth and growled, "It's you again. Isn't it enough that you harmed me once? You want to harm me a second time? What kind of enmity do you have with me?" This question was really inexplicable. Since when did the Grand Marquis Yongle have any interaction with a lowly maidservant? The two dragon scale guards increasingly felt that there was something wrong with this person's head. Upinion didn't answer. Seeing that her appearance was 70 to 80% similar to that of the Lin clan, he felt a little more confident. He opened her sleeve and saw that there was indeed an orchid-shaped red birthmark on her wrist. The sister that he couldn't find for 4 years was actually met in prison. One was an interrogator, and the other was a prisoner in a cage. He didn't know what the heavens had arranged. Upinion took 2 steps back and said indifferently, "There's no need to torture her. First, take her to the prison to await trial." The two dragon scale guards agreed in a low voice and didn't dare to ask any more questions. Upinion walked out of the prison. He didn't feel happy or relieved, and he didn't feel the excitement of finding his family. The only thought in his mind was, why did she appear here and get involved in this matter? Was it a trap set by someone with ulterior motives? All kinds of doubts were accumulated in his heart. He couldn't help but frown and decided to investigate the case first. The author has something to say, thank you to my little cute creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Chapter 37. After investigation, the servant girl's name was Kai Chi and her original name was Shen Miao Chi. She was the first-ranked servant girl of Zhao Minhui, the eldest daughter of Zhao and Shun. Yunzhou was located in the southernmost part of Lingnan. Miasma pervaded the air and transportation was inconvenient. It was a famous place for barren hills and unruly rivers. It was very difficult to be a magistrate there. Most of them were from poor families without any foundation or unlucky people who offended influential people. This Zhao and Shun not only came from a poor family but because of his upright character, he offended many colleagues. Seeing that he could not survive in the capital, he had no choice but to submit a letter to apply for a transfer. Because no one helped him mediate, he was finally sent to Yunzhou and stayed there for more than 10 years. The dragon scale guard checked him again and again but did not find anything suspicious. However, they found a problem with the charcoal. It turned out that the charcoal piled up in the corner was soaked in safflower, peach kernel, musk, Sichuan acaranthes and other herbs to make a medicine. After burning it in the fire, the medicine was forced out. Safflower and other herbs were not good for the fetus and after a special concoction, it could be called a tiger and wolf medicine. Every household came to add charcoal and the smell of smoke had already filled the temple for a long time. However, the crown princess was far away and after the smell of smoke was diluted, the female doctor did not find it. There were a few pregnant women like the crown princess in the temple and they all started to bleed that night. Upinion took the file and read it repeatedly. Finally, he called a few capable subordinates and ordered them to follow the clues of the charcoal and herbs to investigate. A few hundred caddies of charcoal had to be soaked and the amount of medicine needed was very large. No matter how well it was covered, there would always be traces left. Moreover, they could catch a few suspects during the purchasing process. He left behind the last 2 people and ordered them to investigate Shen Miaoqi. Not to mention the others' experience from childhood to adulthood, even the few grains of rice she ate and the few mouthfuls of water she drank had to be reported truthfully. After everyone left, he then revealed a gloomy and anxious expression. Finding his biological younger sister also meant that he found Xiang's family. After the matter was made known, Xiang would definitely be estranged from him and might even follow them to leave the Marquis household and go to Lingnan. Because of this concern, Yu Pinyin wasn't very keen on finding his sister. He only sent out a trusted servant, not a dragon-scale guard. When the Lin clan urged him, he would ask about it. He couldn't remember anything else. The old lady did not believe this at all, but with Xiang'er in the residence, there would not be any trouble, so she nodded. At this time, the news of the crown princess giving birth prematurely had not yet spread. Baiyun Taoist temple was also not closed, so their journey was very smooth. After walking half a li, the entire mountain peak was surrounded by dragon-scale guard. Not even a fly could fly out, much less a person. However, the crown prince's nature was magnanimous and he loved the people as if they were his own children. He only captured all the Taoists in the temple and the residents in the courtyard. Other people who were not suspicious were recorded by the dragon-scale guard. After they wrote down their statements, they were released back to their own courtyards. This action won him a great deal of goodwill from the people. With Yu Pinyin present, the crown prince simply let go of his hands and waited for the crown princess to give birth. This was his first legitimate son, the grandson that his imperial father had been looking forward to for 6 years. If he had a son in one fell swoop, then his position as the crown prince would be truly stable. Even if he had an accident, based on his imperial father's temperament, the throne would only be passed to his legitimate grandson, and not any of his brothers. Baiyun Taoist temple was naturally not as comfortable as home. As soon as Yu Xiang entered the room, she had people heat the earth. When the temperature rose, she immediately took off her clothes. Wearing only a small dudu, she picked up a bronze mirror to observe the blisters on her back. Lulu took the bronze mirror and helped her adjust the angle. She hesitated and said, "Miss, in the future, you have to avoid Master Ho. Even if you are biological siblings, you can't do that." "Do what?" Yu Xiang untied the knot of her vest and also took off her dudu. 2 plump white lumps trembled as they jumped out, causing Lulu's face to turn red and her mouth to dry up. She thought that the Mrs. body was really too beautiful. As a woman, she could not resist the temptation. She did not know how Master Ho felt. Thinking of this, her expression changed slightly. She secretly cursed herself for being possessed. Then she cleared her throat and said, that is, you have to take off your clothes in front of him. Today, you only have a duda left. Even though you are biological siblings, you should still avoid it." Yu Xiang carelessly waved her hand, "I know. I was just scared silly by the insects." Although she said this, she did not take it to heart. In the end, she could not agree with the ancient women's cruel view of chastity. If someone accidentally touched her, she would cut off her arm. What kind of logic was this? Moreover, Yu Pinyin was her older brother. What was there that she could not see? Lulu nodded in relief. This back and forth, up and down, was enough to see the emperor's style of doing things. He was very fair in court and dealt with everything according to the rules. He punished those who should be punished, and rewarded those who should be rewarded. He was impartial. Fang Zhichen's talent had nothing to do with his family background, so he gave Fang Zhichen an official title. If the Fang clan was indeed guilty, Fang Zhichen would be punished according to the laws of the Great Han Dynasty, and he would be demoted according to the laws of the Great Han Dynasty. However, Yu Xiang wouldn't tell Yu Xiu these things. Even if she did, she wouldn't believe her and would use the greatest malice to guess her intentions. Yu Pinyan's status was special, and he had made countless enemies in court. In these past few years, Yu Xiang hated that she couldn't cultivate until she was invulnerable to poison and invulnerable to swords and spears, just so she wouldn't be a burden to her brother. She didn't have many friends, and she rarely spoke when she went out. Today, Marquis Yongle only had contact with a few old friends of the matriarch, and almost never walked around the capital. She slowly led the Marquis household to the path of a lonely official, because this was what the emperor wanted to see. Even her unreasonable and overbearing behavior, and Yu Pinyan's unprincipled doting on her, were all things that the emperor was satisfied with. Yu Pinyan needed a weakness, and not everything was perfect. She did everything that she could do, just to let Yu Pinyan go further and more smoothly. However, Yu Xiu kept on doing stupid things. First, she curried favor with a noble lady, and then she tried to marry into a noble family. Why didn't she think about it? With the special status of the commander, how could the emperor be willing to see the prefecture Yu and those old aristocratic families work together? The emperors will doom Yu Xiu to marry into an ordinary family and live an ordinary life. Therefore, the matriarch rejected many families that were more prominent than the Fang family in order to reassure the emperor. However, a mere salt transport envoy, Si Yuntong, was able to make Yu Xiu lose her rationality. If she knew that there were other families that came to propose marriage, and they were all rejected by the matriarch, wouldn't she hate the matriarch to the bone? Thinking of this, Yu Xiang felt powerless. He waved his hand and said, "Lock her up in the room. When the old ancestor comes back, we'll deal with her separately." He then pointed at Qinya. "This girl will be flogged 30 times first, then locked up in the woodshed." The Qiu clan complied and pushed Yu Xiu into the room. Yu Xiu fiercely spat at the Qiu clan and shouted, "Yu Xiang, what are you trying to show off in front of me for? Let me tell you, you're just a wild." Before she could finish her sentence, the Qiu clan covered her mouth and locked her hands behind her back. They then casually found a handkerchief from the sewing basket and stuffed it into her mouth. Her curses immediately turned into indistinct whimpers. Yu Xiang naturally knew what she was going to say. He pursed his lips and left in the drizzle. The Qiu clan continued to detain Yu Xiu. When they all walked away, they advised in low voices, "My eldest miss, please stop. So what if Miss Xiang, isn't of the Marquis family's bloodline? The old lady has her eyes on her, Master Ho has his eyes on her, then isn't she the same? Not to mention that you can't compare to her, even if the real D-Miss comes back, she still can't compare to her. She has the old lady and Master Ho's love. What do you have to compete with her? Hurry up and stop. Otherwise, your marriage will be even more hopeless." Yu Xiu slowly calmed down. Her face was expressionless, but her hatred for Yu Xiang deepened. Madame Qiu waited for a moment before letting go of her. She immediately tore off the handkerchief in her mouth and gave Madame Qiu a backhand slap. She scolded fiercely, "You traitor, I'll deal with you sooner or later." The Qiu clan had originally been sent by the Lin clan to spy on Yu Xiu, so they naturally knew about Yu Xiang's background. However, she was quick-witted. She felt that there was no future for her if she followed the Lin clan, so she quickly submitted to Yu Xiang. She covered her red and swollen face as she walked out of the room. When she saw Qinya tied up on the floor, she immediately kicked her to vent her anger. She thought to herself, "What do you mean by traitor? A fine bird should choose a tree to nest in. With Master Ho's love for Miss Xiang, this prefecture Yu is still under Miss Xiang's control. An idiot like you wants to surpass Miss Xiang, in every way. Dream on. The author has something to say. I have an appointment today. I'll probably be on the train when you see this chapter, full of passion. I'll make up for it when I get back. Moi. Chapter 39. The crown princess had been in labor for an entire night. The midwife stuffed ginseng slices into her mouth for the 5th time and shouted into her ear, "Your Highness, use more strength. Just a little bit more." The crown princess's consciousness was already blurred and she couldn't even scream. She shook her head slightly and looked like she was about to faint. If she really fainted, the 2 babies in her belly would suffocate, and she might not be able to save the mother. The midwife was worried, but she didn't dare to say it. She pressed hard on the crown princess' belly while looking back for Nurse Song. "Come here and say something to master to wake her up." If she really fainted, everyone in the room would. She gestured to her neck. Nurse Song hurriedly came forward to wipe her master's sweat. She racked her brains to think of an excuse, such as "His Highness the Crown Prince is waiting for you outside, His Majesty has been waiting for you for a long time, if something happens to you, wouldn't your enemies be happy," and so on. The Crown Princess didn't respond, and her eyelids were getting heavier. Nurse Song suddenly had a flash of inspiration and shouted, "Your Highness, do you still remember the dragon phoenix lot that Miss Xiang drew? She said that the gods and Buddhas in the sky were using her hand to bless you. We are now in Baiyun Taoist Temple. Maybe Dao Zhu is watching us from the sky." The bamboo turned into a dragon and a phoenix into the sky. The light of Dao shines and dispels all evil. With Dao Zhu's blessing, those evil people won't be able to hurt you. You and the 2 little imperial grandsons will be safe and sound. This is God's will, God's will. Your Highness, if you use more strength, the little imperial grandsons will be out in the next moment. The crown princess' eyelids were still drooping at first, but when she heard the last few words, her eyes suddenly widened. She chewed the ginseng slices in her mouth and swallowed the ginseng juice. She screamed and used more strength. When people were at their most desperate, they would always pray to the gods and Buddhas they believed in for help. The crown princess was no exception. With the hint of the lot in front of her, she suddenly surged with infinite hope and strength. She actually came back to life at the moment of death and fought for a future for herself. The sky was slightly bright. The crown prince stood in the corridor for the whole night. Unknowingly, the drizzle had stopped, leaving behind only a sky-blue mist that shrouded the entire mountaintop. In the distance, the towering and precipitous peaks were faintly discernible in the rolling clouds. The scenery was breathtakingly beautiful. Suddenly, a gap appeared in the thick clouds, and golden rays of light spilled down from the gap, projecting onto the peak of a mountain. The colorful halos spread out layer by layer, making the sky-blue color of the mountain come alive. It was already 8:45 in the morning and she was still lying on the bed sleeping. She did not wear anything on her upper body except for a pair of smoky green bloomers. Part of the quilt was lifted, revealing half of her fair and tender jade-like arm. When the sunlight shone in from outside the window, it actually gave off a lustrous glow. It was really very seductive. Old Lady Tai walked over and tucked her in, then tidied her unkempt hair and scolded, "Lazy girl, what time is it and you are still lying in bed? Quickly get up. You don't know, right? The crown princess gave birth prematurely." Yu Xiang was completely awake. She propped up her upper body and asked, "What did she give birth to? Is it a boy or a girl?" "She gave birth to a pair of twins. Her horoscope is really good. The heavens even sent down an auspicious sign." Old Lady Tai told her the story she had heard from Nanny Song about the light of Tao shining on all things. She lovingly pinched the tip of her granddaughter's nose and smiled, "My granddaughter is really a little lucky star. Is your back done soaking?" Let old ancestor take a look. Yuxiang brushed her long hair aside and said, "It's much better after applying some medicine." Old ancestor, don't be happy yet. I want to tell you something depressing. Old lady Tai Tai was smiling at first, but when she heard the last part, her face became so gloomy that it could drip water. Yuxiang rubbed the corners of her eyes and complained in a sobbing voice, "The Fong clan humiliated me like this. Old ancestor, you have to help me." After she finished speaking, she blinked her cat eyes and tears streamed down her face. She looked very pitiful. Old lady Tai Tai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She poked her forehead and said angrily, "Quickly put away the cat urine. Do you think I don't know your character? It's already good that you didn't scold that Fong clan boy until he wanted to die from shame and anger." Yuxiang wiped away her tears and smiled shyly, "If I don't scold him to death, how can I relieve the hatred in my heart? Old ancestor, you should quickly drive them away. Living in the Marquis household is annoying for no reason." "Okay, old ancestor will send people to drive them away." Old lady Tai Tai rubbed the top of her granddaughter's head and sighed, "Men are afraid of entering the wrong profession, women are afraid of marrying the wrong man. The Pei clan married the wrong person after all. Those salt merchants stole the emperor's silver and lived more luxurious lives than the emperor. They even praised the salt administration officials until they didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. But they didn't know that the more wealthy they were, the closer they were to death. This time, the crown princess and the two little imperial grandsons were killed. The emperor's heart was filled with anger, but he had nowhere to vent it. They should be used to vent it. In any case, he was the person who came in third place and was admired by countless noble ladies. Who did Yuxiang think she was? She was just a useless person. When he thought about it deeply, his admiration for Yuxiang turned into resentment. The Pei clan became more and more worried. They grabbed him and interrogated him until Fang Jichen almost cried. Then, he stuttered and told them about how he was caught by Yuxiang in the middle of the night. The Pei clan became anxious and scolded, "Son, you're so muddle-headed. Why did you go just because she asked you to? Why don't you use your brain? This is the capital, prefecture you. It's not our old house. How can you go to a place like the backyard? What should we do now? I'm afraid that your marriage with the second daughter of the Yu family won't work out. No, I have to hurry and apologize to the old madam." As he spoke, he rummaged through the boxes for expensive gifts. "So be it. I don't want to marry her either. Who can you marry now that you've ruined the reputation of the eldest daughter of the Yu family? You're in the wrong in this matter. You have to appease the old madam. Don't make enemies instead of marrying her." The Pei clan found a set of priceless jadeite head ornaments and wrapped it in a brocade box. You may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. I really don't dare to marry either of the two daughters of the Marquis family. Fang Jichen couldn't suppress his grievances and complained, "Mother, the second daughter of the Yu family actually said that I'm not even worthy to carry her shoes." "Mother, your son feels terrible." "What? Did she really say that?" Her son was the reverse scale of the Pei clan. She couldn't tolerate anyone saying anything bad about him. She immediately slammed the table and scolded, "What a little bitch. She really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. She's just a useless person. If it weren't for..." "What for? You eat from my Marquis family and live in my Marquis family. You even scold my Marquis family. My Marquis family can't afford to keep such a great Buddha like Madame Fong. Please leave quickly." Mama Ma came in with a few maidservants and said bluntly, "Please point out what belongs to you. The maidservants will help you pack it up and carry it out." The carriage is already parked outside the corner gate. Don't waste everyone's time. No, I want to see the old madam. The Pei clan became anxious. A few days ago, they received a letter from Master Fong saying that he was going to marry the family Yu's daughter. It would be best if she was the daughter of the first wife. Everyone in the Great Han Dynasty knew that Yu Xiang risked her life to save her brother. Yu Pinyan's unprincipled love for her was no longer news. Marrying Yu Xiang was tantamount to grabbing Yu Pinyan's weak spot. What kind of person was Yu Pinyan? Those who were ordered to kill were all commanders. Chapter 41. What did your son do last night? Say it again. He said each word slowly, his thumb gently stroking the scabbard. His movements looked extremely gentle, but they contained a chilling murderous intent. The Pei clan members' tongues seemed to have been cut off. They opened and closed their mouths, but no sound came out. Yu Pinyan turned to look at Fong Zhichen. His gaze wandered over the bulging veins on his neck. His gaze was like an invisible blade, slowly and cruelly cutting through his flesh. It was as if his head would fall to the ground and his blood would splatter everywhere if he dared to answer yes. Fong Zhichen instantly broke out in a cold sweat. He covered his neck and stammered, I went to the first Mrs. room last night, not the second Mrs. room. My mother said that was nonsense. It was the first miss who begged me again and again that I reluctantly went. Commandant Yu, please spare my life for the sake of my grandmother. His legs trembled, and he could not stand straight. He almost knelt down. Yu Pinyan glanced at Mama Ma. Mama Ma nodded slightly, indicating that he was telling the truth. Yu Siyu had been stupid for a long time. She never knew who she should befriend and who she should not befriend. Even now, she was confused about who she should marry and who she should not marry. Yu Pinyan did not have the leisure to care about her. He sheathed his sword, turned around and strode away. As for the malicious slander from the Pei clan, he would make it up to old Master Fong. The thick murderous intent that filled the air slowly dissipated with his footsteps. The Pei clan mother and son breathed heavily, looking as if they had just survived a disaster. Madam Fong, young Master Fong, please. The carriage has been waiting outside for a long time. Mama Ma pushed the two of them and said sarcastically, oh, you still don't want to leave? Shall I call Master Ho to send you off? The Pei clan mother and son turned pale with fright. They hurriedly supported each other and walked towards the Jiaoman. Mama Ma said to the two of them, don't spread any rumors to harm the reputation of our prefecture you. You should know what our Master Ho does. The dragon scale guard's eyes and ears are everywhere. If you say anything unpleasant, be careful of your tongues being cut off. The Pei clan mother and son walked faster, as if there were evil spirits chasing after them. Mama Ma spat and then went back to report. As a large number of blisters had risen on her back, she felt an unbearable itch when she rubbed against the cloth. Therefore, she ordered her men to set the floor heater on fire, and when the temperature in the room rose, she took off her outer shirt, wearing only a pink dudu and a pair of loose, smoky green bloomers, which nearly reached her waist. Lazily, she lay on her stomach on the soft couch, counting a box of small golden pigs. She didn't wear her hair in a bun. The falling bloomers could not cover the faintly discernible cleavage. It made his eyes burn with passion. He withdrew his hand as if he had been scalded. He couldn't get rid of the slippery feeling that remained on his fingertips. He didn't dare to think or look. He put down the ointment, found an opaque brocade robe from the box, and covered his sister's body. After doing all this, he felt as if he had fought the most difficult battle. His forehead was covered with sweat, and his breathing was much heavier. Yu Xiang was a heartless person. When she was with her brother, she never thought about the difference between men and women. She pointed at the sweat on his forehead and laughed. The house is burning, and the sun is shining outside. Big brother, take off your coat. Look at how hot you are. Yupinyan's body wasn't hot, but his heart was. He could only smile bitterly when he heard this. However, he obeyed and took off his outer robe and court boots. He found a historical record and sat cross-legged on the couch. He sat beside his sister and slowly read. A calm heart naturally cooled down. Reading for a while might make him feel better. If he was asked to leave, he would rather stay and suffer in pain and happiness. Yuxiang had long been accustomed to her brother reading by her side. She continued to count her little golden pigs. She looked at her brother when she counted 1, then looked at him again when she counted 1. She seemed to want to say something, but then hesitated. Yupinyan felt as if a goose feather had brushed past his heart when he was stared at by that pair of bright and spirited cat eyes. He endured for a moment before he calmly said, "If you have something to say, say it. Why do you keep looking at me?" He turned his head and saw his sister propped up her upper body. The collar of her bodice drooped down, revealing a seductive cleavage. With just a glance, he could imagine how soft it would feel. He immediately retracted his gaze and stared at the words on the page. His brain couldn't recognize them anymore. He secretly took a deep breath. Yuxiang didn't notice. She stammered, "Big brother, I want to buy a house in the countryside. If you want to buy it in the capital." "What good houses are there in the countryside?" "They're all fields or brick houses." Yupinyan turned a page. His voice was a bit hoarse. "It's better to buy it in the countryside. If sister-in-law dislikes me in the future, I can stay away. You said I'm a good-for-nothing. If you protect me now, who knows how you'll think I'm a hindrance when you have a wife and children in the future." Yuxiang became more and more upset as she spoke. She even began to cry. She hurriedly raised her hand to wipe it away. Yupinyan didn't look at her. He stared at the page and said coldly, "Don't listen to her nonsense." It seemed that he should marry Yuxiu off as soon as possible. Yuxiang bit her lip. Her expression was still very uneasy. "Brother, there's no one else in this world who treats me as well as you do. So, can I not marry? I'll just stay by your side for the rest of my life." The hostility in Yupinyan's eyes disappeared. He hugged her and laughed softly. His chest vibrated with a strong sense of joy. Did that mean he agreed? Yuxiang also laughed. She used the tip of her nose to touch his and deeply breathed in the sandalwood scent that made her feel at ease. Through the crack in the window, Lulu saw the brother and sister entangled together. The strange feeling in her heart grew stronger. Just as she was hesitating whether she should find an excuse to go in, she saw Master Ho's personal bodyguard hurriedly run over. "Is there something you need from Master Ho?" She hurriedly went forward. "I'll have to trouble Miss Lulu to go in and report that the person Master Ho wanted to investigate has been found. 2 dragon scale guards are currently waiting in the study." The bodyguard cupped his hands. Yupinyan had already heard their conversation. He gently placed his little sister on the couch and covered her with a thin blanket. Only then did he put on his outer robe and court boots and leave. Yupinyan looked up and said indifferently, "I remember that she's your little sister." Shen Yuanqi shook his head, "This official remembers that you are her biological brother." After saying that, he couldn't help but laugh. To the cold-blooded Yupinyan, what did blood mean? If he wanted to find Shen Miaoqi, with the dragon scale guard in his hands, it would only take 3 to 4 days. However, he had searched for 4 whole years. It was enough to show that he did not care about Shen Miaoqi's life or death. If not for Xiang saving his life that year, how could he have such peaceful days today? Yu Pinyin had always been someone who did not recognize his own family. Seeing the youth's cold eyes sweep over, Shen Yuanqi quickly stopped laughing and slowly said, "Domain Chief Darren does not need to use words to test me. I will tell Darren the truth. The current me and Shen Miaoqi do not have half a bit of friendship, only hatred. She caused the family Shen to collapse and I only resent her. However, she should not have stolen mother's life saving money and ran away. Mother stayed in bed for 3 days before she passed away with hatred. I tried to close her eyes several times but was unable to. She really died with grievances. You did not know that on the day she left, mother had already passed me a message, asking me to ask for leave from Godfather and bring her to the capital to look for relatives. She said that it was to compensate her for the suffering she had suffered all these years." Suffering? When had she ever suffered any bit of suffering in my family? Speaking till here, Shen Yuanqi poured away the hot tea and replaced it with a cup of strong wine. He sneered and said, "If I had known earlier, I would have sent her back even if I had to risk my life. It was also because father made a mistake and was afraid of your family's revenge, so he hid his tracks and fled back to Lingnan. Us merchants originally had low status and how could we afford to offend the nobles? If we were to let you find her, perhaps our entire family would lose their lives. Who would have thought that even if we did not let you find her, our family would still be ruined by her? Could this be retribution?" Shen Yuanqi continuously drank 2 cups of strong wine and shook his head with a bitter smile. "Domain Chief Darren does not know. Our family Shen is not completely without conscience. We knew that she was of noble birth and thus did not dare to neglect her. Since young, everything she ate and wore was the best. We also asked a teacher to carefully guide her and molded her in the direction of a noble lady. In terms of status, even her father had to lower his head in front of her. Now that I think about it, it was because of our indulgence that she was raised to have a heart higher than the sky and thus planted the root of the disaster early." Holding the empty wine cup in silence for a long time, Shen Yuanqi then recovered his calm and cupped his hands. "This official forgot himself and caused Domain Chief Darren to laugh at me." Hearing that Shen Miaoqi had fallen into Darren's hands, this official thought that this day would come sooner or later. This official only wants to ask Darren one thing. "What do you want to do with Xiang?" As for this official, I asked Domain Chief Darren to be magnanimous and let this official off on the account that my family Shen has already been ruined. He was not someone who was greedy for life and afraid of death. However, Shen Miaoqi had returned and his younger sister's future was uncertain. He was really not at ease to die like this. Yu Pinyin glanced at him and said in an unkind tone, "Ben Ho is not interested in taking your life. Moreover, Xiang is not someone you can call. He originally wanted to kill this person to cover up the past but changed his mind at the last moment. This person may still be of some use to him." Shen Yuanqi stared blankly and then nodded with a bitter smile. "It is this official who has overstepped. How does Darren intend to settle Shen Miaoqi and how to deal with my younger sister?" Yu Pinyin also poured away the tea and replaced it with a cup of strong wine. He drank it in one gulp and coldly said, "Xiang is Ben Ho's younger sister." Saying that Xiang was not allowed and saying that her younger sister was not allowed, Commandant Yu's character was indeed as tyrannical and overbearing as the rumors. Shen Yuanqi thought for a moment and straightforwardly expressed his attitude. No matter how much power Darren has, he is unable to erase this official's blood relationship with Xiang in Second Young Mississippi. Now that Shen Miaoqi has been found by Darren, shouldn't Second Young Miss also be brought back to the family by this official? It is time for everyone to return to their respective places but not now. When he said this, Yu Pinyin's expression was particularly gloomy. Shen Yuanqi's chest surged with anger but also faintly felt joy. The anger was because family Yu had abandoned his younger sister, and the joy was because he was able to reunite with his only family member. He took a few deep breaths to control his expression and asked, "When is that?" Yu Pinyin did not answer and put down the wine cup. "Ben Ho came here to warn you. Without Ben Ho's permission, do not attempt to acknowledge Xiang, and you are not allowed to have any contact with her. If you do not know what is good for you, Ben Ho has thousands of ways to make you and the Shui family completely disappear. When the time is right, Ben Ho will naturally send someone to inform you." Facing the famous king of hell who killed people like scything flax, Shen Yuanqi could only nod with a bitter smile. Moreover, if he rashly went to acknowledge Xiang, she would definitely not be willing to leave with him. Although the old lady didn't understand, she also felt that what he said was right. Xiang couldn't be given to other families, so she agreed without hesitation. When the guard brought the file, she couldn't wait to read it. Mama Ma also leaned over to take a look. Her eyes were as wide as copper bells, and she kept chanting Buddhist scriptures. After reading it, the two of them sighed at the same time. This is really a sin. She already knew that her granddaughter was a jinx, but she didn't expect her fate to be so bad. The first time she jinxed her family Shen, the second time she jinxed her family Shen, the third time she jinxed her father's death, the fourth time she jinxed her mother's death, and the fifth time she jinxed Shen Yuanqi to become a slave, his future ruined. The caravan that met her was robbed by bandits, killed, and scattered. Zhao Anshuan, who met her, had his promotion opportunity snatched away in the blink of an eye. The crown princess, who met her, was immediately born prematurely and narrowly escaped death. Wherever she went, she jinxed everything. She could be called a mobile source of disaster. What was even more frightening was that she and Yu Pinyin had only met twice, and both times she was involved in the disaster of being sentenced to prison. The first time was fine, but the second time was extremely dangerous. If something happened to the crown princess and the little imperial grandson, she would shout out her identity in prison, and her family would also be finished. The old lady leaned on the couch and rubbed her temples. In her mind, she kept recalling Master Kuhai's judgment. Everything really came true. Siblings can't coexist when they fight. This jinx really did come to fight with Yen for fate. She narrowly avoided it this time, but what about the next time? What about the time after that? Fate was somewhat illusory, and she could temporarily ignore it. But more importantly, her granddaughter's character didn't seem good. She abandoned her mother, whom she had raised for 14 years, and even took away her mother's life-saving money. The kindness of raising her was greater than the kindness of giving birth to her. No matter what the family Shen did wrong, they still raised her. She lived a life of luxury, had a group of servants, and didn't lack anything. Even when the family went bankrupt, she didn't lose out at all. Instead, she let her own son sell himself as a slave to continue providing for her, and even risked his life to send her home. Her actions this time could even be said to be cruel and unscrupulous. If such a person were to be brought home, who knew how much trouble it would cause? The old lady fiercely massaged her temples, and fell into an unprecedented struggle. The author has something to say. Ahem, I heard that if you buy it on a computer or a phone, the author gets a different cut. If you buy it on a computer, you get 20% more. I'm handing over the house at the end of the year, and there's still a few decades of mortgage to pay. Dai, who is so short of money that he's going crazy, begs all of you to give me 20% more if it's convenient. Of course, everything is still based on your convenience _. Also, I want to thank my cute little creatures and all of my friends who supported the original version. Mwax. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.